Staffing is a continuously growing industry, according to industry experts at staffingindustry.com. In 2021, the staffing industry was estimated to rise by 16% to $157.4 billion. And the American Association for Staffing estimates that there's about 25,000 or a little over 25,000 recruiting and staffing agencies in the United States alone, which means that there's plenty of opportunities to get into this constantly changing industry. When you think about starting a staffing agency or a recruiting agency, there's really two main avenues that you can take. You can go the staffing route or you can go the direct hires route. And while both of these avenues are lucrative, one is definitely easier than the other. In this video, I'm going to talk about how direct hires is the easiest way to get into this billion-dollar industry. So stay tuned. Hey, what's up YouTube? It's Natasha here, the business recruiter, and I want to welcome you to my channel where I talk about all things recruiting. So before we dive into the specifics of direct hire, I want to go into exactly what it means. I also want to note that there's some other names that direct hires goes by in the industry that you may hear interchangeably. So direct placement or permanent placement are other names that you might hear. So direct hire is essentially working with a company to fill a position or job opening that they have with a candidate who's going to stay in that position permanently versus on a temporary basis. When working with companies to secure a direct hire placement, the first step in this process is to work with them in order to lock in a contract. Now, there are three important components for any contract that you have in terms of direct hire, and those components are going to be your fee, your guarantee, and then your net payment terms. The fee is usually the percentage that you'll get paid, and it's based on the first year's salary. Typically, the guarantee is essentially how long that candidate has to stay in the role before you have to either give a refund, which you should never do, or find a replacement for that particular candidate if they were to leave the role before the guarantee period. So an easy example of that would be 90 days. So essentially, let's say that a company hires on a candidate and your guarantee is 90 days. That candidate has to stay in the role for 90 days without you having to give the company a refund or to replace that particular candidate with someone else. So if that candidate were to leave that position, let's say within 60 days, and they haven't quite hit that 90-day mark, then you have the option to either give that company a refund for the money or find a replacement candidate. I'll never recommend that you give a refund, so the most important thing here is for you to find a replacement candidate. And finally, your net payment terms are essentially when the company has to give you or provide you with payment for the services that you provided. So let's say, for example, you have terms of net 30. Essentially, that means that the company has to pay you within 30 days of the invoice date. Now, those are the basics of a contract. There's a lot of other things that goes into a contract that we'll definitely discuss in another video, but I wanted to make sure that you had the basics before we go into the rest of what a direct hire placement is. So once the contract is in place, you'll enter what I call the direct hire life cycle, and there's essentially 5 main phases that are associated with this life cycle. So the first phase of this is going to be the job order request. Essentially, this is the company seeking your help to fill a role. The second is going to be sourcing and screening, you finding and evaluating a candidate's knowledge, skills, and abilities to what the company is looking for that particular role in order for you to be able to fill it. Your third step or phase within this direct hire life cycle is going to be submission, and this is you sending qualified candidates over to the company to review. Fourth is going to be interviews. So the company interviewing candidates that you send over that they're interested in learning more about. And then finally is going to be placement, the company hiring a qualified candidate after completing the interview process. So the nice thing about direct hire placements is the fact that you don't need a lot to really get started in terms of upfront costs, especially when you compare it to staffing. This is why I consider it to be one of the biggest pros in terms of being able to get into the recruiting industry. In my opinion, the things that you need that are going to be most important throughout this process are your ability to communicate with companies in order to actually get a contract in place and also be able to follow up with them. You're going to need some consistency and determination there because it's definitely not going to happen on your first go around. I would say the second thing that you really need is the ability to be able to source and screen candidates, and there's so many ways to go about doing this. And then finally, in terms of being able to complete or go through the process of getting direct hires, it's really going to be about that follow-up piece throughout the interview process as well, in terms of following up with the company as well as the candidate in order to be able to make sure that you get through the full direct hire life cycle and get to that placement. Now, I do also encourage you to make sure that you do have your official company set up via your state as far as it being registered. And the reason for this is that you will have to pay taxes on the money that you make, as well as the fact that you'll also have to be able to show companies that you're legitimate in terms of providing them with an EIN or employer identification number so that they can actually process a payment and get it sent to you. But in terms of upfront costs in order to get started, it's very minimal. Another pro about direct hires is the fact that it really teaches you the fundamentals of what recruiting is. And I'm talking every step of the recruiting process, from sourcing, screening, interviewing, invoicing, everything that it really takes in order to be able to run a successful recruiting agency on the direct hire side. It teaches you all of the basics when you're going through that process of working with a company in order to place direct hires. And I would say that the last pro is just the fact that you can do this with any industry, from healthcare to tech to finance. There is no shortage of niches in terms of how you can go about leveraging your time in order to be able to focus on placing direct hires. Now that we've gone through some pros, I definitely want to make sure that I go through the cons as well. And one of the biggest cons in terms of direct hire placements is the fact that you can get paid a little bit later than what your actual terms are. This isn't uncommon in the industry, and honestly, when you think about it, small and large companies have a lot going on, and honestly, your invoice can just be overlooked. So with that being stated, you just have to be able to have the ability to follow up and to make sure that you're on top of it in terms of making sure that you're getting paid in a timely manner. It's also important to note that you can set this up in terms of taking a look at your contract to make sure that you have ideal things in there. So just in case you do get a late payment, maybe you have a late fee schedule that's embedded within your contract with that particular company. So that's just another way for you to increase your revenue. The second con would honestly be guarantees. I mean, they literally are a gift and a curse, honestly. If your guarantees are set up in a way in which they are a short period of time, usually you're going to be more on the lines of not really having to worry about what your guarantees are. However, if your guarantees that you negotiate with the company are a little bit longer in terms of their time frame, meaning maybe even 365 days, it gets to be a little bit harder, especially in this talent or external market that we're in right now in terms of individuals looking for jobs. It's not even guaranteed that someone is going to get a new role and stay there for a year. So with that being stated, guarantees can be a huge con because they can definitely create more time for you in terms of focusing on something that you've already put your time and energy into focusing on prior. Meaning that with guarantees, if you don't give a refund for the company, which means less money for you, then you're going to have to replace that particular candidate. That means another search, another round of interviews, another round of screening resumes. It's just a lot. So guarantees are definitely a con, but can also be a good thing as well, contingent on what your terms are. And the last con that I really want to stress is the fact that recruiting or direct hires is not a passive business in any way, meaning that you're really going to have to be involved, especially in the beginning process of it, if you're going to be a one-man or woman show in terms of how you actually go about doing this. You're going to have to screen candidates, you're going to have to source them, you're going to have to follow up with the company. There's a lot of moving pieces to it. You're going to have to ensure that you're doing all of those so that you get through the full direct hire life cycle. With that being stated, eventually this can become a more passive business for you as you get acclimated to it, as well as put the systems and processes in place in order to make it more passive for you. So if you're just starting out in the recruiting industry, then my recommendation is going to be that you focus on direct hires. It literally is the easiest way for you to enter into this billion-dollar industry. There's not a lot of upfront costs that are associated with it. There is going to be some sweat equity that you're going to have to put into it, but honestly, the reward is so high and the industry is so lucrative. Why wouldn't you start? Well, I hope that this video was worthwhile for you. As always, I am in my Facebook group talking all things recruiting. Feel free to join. I'll be sure to leave that link down below in the description box. And if you haven't already, make sure that you subscribe to my channel and hit the bell so that you get notifications of all of my new videos. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and I'll catch you on the next one.